Hi, in this video we'll be talking about outlining Essay 3 with special attention given to the steps we should take when evolving a thesis and how these work in the outlining process. But first, what is an outline? An outline is a special form of pre-writing or drafting. It allows you to sketch out a full plan for an essay, ordering your main points as you will write them paragraph by paragraph or section by section. This helps you keep in mind the steps you will take in writing your essay, as well as provide you with a sort of roadmap of the essay as you write, so your final draft will be more manageable, and it will help you track your evolving thesis in Essay 3. It will help you plan how your thesis will evolve and when, including what evidence you will introduce to do so, and in what order. Here's a sample outline. Notice how the sections, numbered in capital Roman numerals, mark different sections or movements of the essay. The introduction of the topic, the confirming evidence for the initial thesis, and the introduction of complicating evidence leading up to the evolution of the thesis. The subdivisions of these topics, listed by lowercase letters, provide reminders about what needs to happen in the full draft, notes specific pieces of evidence that will be used, and provides a sample version of the thesis for that point in the essay. Outlining allows you to see very clearly the steps being taken in the process of writing. This is important because, above all, Essay 3 is a process. There are a series of iterative steps to take to fully evolve your thesis. They are: first, formulate a working thesis. Second, explain how your thesis is backed up by details of the text or the object you are analyzing. Third, locate evidence that is not adequately accounted for by the working thesis. Fourth, use this complicating evidence to reformulate, evolve, or extend the thesis. And fifth, test the adequacy of the evolved thesis by repeating steps 2, 3, and 4. These are all condensed from the extensive write-up of this process given to you in Writing Analytically, pages 156 through 157. For now, let's try putting these into practice on a sample object. We'll start with step 1, formulate a working thesis. Your thesis must, at its most basic level, be a claim about some issue of representation in your object of analysis. This means it must be based on a certain careful reading of that object. Let's take a moment to look at this photo by Dorothea Lange. Taken sometime close to 1940, it shows school children reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. To make a good claim about this photo, we should analyze it using a combination of the method and the visual skills we learned at the beginning of Unit 3. Using the method, I can note an interesting detail. Many of these children are of diverse ethnicities and backgrounds. My attention to the formal qualities of the photo, meanwhile, lets me see how the focus of the photo is not these kids themselves, so much as it is the flag that seems to tower above them. My eyes move down to the children from the flag because of the vectors provided by the flag's pole and fabric. The flag seems to be held up almost like an umbrella, covering or encompassing the children who are united beneath it. A claim I might make about the photo, based on this evidence, is that it represents the American ideal of e pluribus unum, a Latin phrase meaning from many one, and appears on the Great Seal of the United States as a sort of motto. All of these children come together as one, though they are many and diverse. So now that we have a working thesis, we want to move on to step 2, which is to show how it is confirmed or backed up by the evidence that we've found. This is what this would look like in an outline, with our working thesis providing a heading while its supporting details are listed below it. Now it's time for step 3, locate evidence that is not adequately accounted for by the working thesis. There may be a few pieces of evidence you can locate that trouble this thesis. Choosing which ones to focus on and in what order is part of the challenge of Essay 3, and one of the reasons outlining this essay is a helpful exercise. Given our working thesis, what strikes you as potentially complicating our claim that this photo represents an American ideal? One thing that comes to mind is, well, this is just a bunch of elementary school kids. Do they really care about e pluribus unum? They probably don't even know Latin. So our complicating evidence might be that these children are too young to really understand the significance of patriotism and, by extension, their patriotic gestures. The kid over on the left, who appears to be keeling over from a heart attack or just generally goofing off, is definitely not treating this moment with due reverence. So now we add the complicating evidence to our outline. We'll use this complicating evidence to reformulate, or in other words to evolve, our initial thesis. But how do we do that? Complicating evidence is evidence that is not fully accounted for by the working thesis. But this doesn't mean that we're abandoning the working thesis. Rather, we're trying to grow it, to modify our original claim so that it accommodates the new evidence. So our first step for the complicating evidence is to ask, so what? So what if the kids are young? Why does that matter? And how does that impact the original claim? Well, we've assumed it means that they don't really understand what they're doing. But of course they don't. No offense, but they're just students. Which also means that they're probably a little bit innocent. Which also means that they're learning. So we might say they're in the process of learning the Pledge of Allegiance, learning what it means and how it unites all of them as citizens. So what we're seeing here is not E pluribus unum itself, but a moment of progress toward the American ideal. With this insight, we can revise our thesis so it accommodates the new evidence. Now comes our final step. We will test the adequacy of the evolved thesis by repeating steps 2, 3, and 4. So, back to step 2. What evidence backs up our revised thesis? We return to the outline and add our revised thesis and the confirming evidence we've already found. Now we move on to step 3. What still doesn't fit? As before, there may be several things we can think of, and the trick here is to choose what we will introduce next. Here are some possibilities. We say this photo is about how many become one, but all the people we see are boys. Are there no girls in this school? Do they get to learn the pledge? Is it not important if girls learn to be patriotic? Our second possibility requires us to think about the background and context of this photo. This is 1940, remember, just before World War II. After the 1942 attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States sent many of its Japanese American citizens to internment camps under suspicion of their being spies. Some of the boys in this photo might be of Japanese heritage and were probably sent to those internment camps if so. How does this knowledge change the photo's ideal of E pluribus unum, especially if we're arguing that it's a moment of progress? In both cases, we've noticed how a broad claim for unity among all people still leaves some people out, and how the photo's representation can help us speak about that issue. Whichever one we choose to write about, however, for our confirming and complicating evidence, we'll definitely have to do some independent research to speak convincingly about the lives of young girls in the 1940s, or the lives of Japanese Americans prior to and just after World War II. To recap, Essay 3 is a process of evolving a thesis, and ends when you have fully evolved that thesis. You've carefully chosen your complications and reformulated your thesis to account for them. By the end of the paper, your fully evolved thesis will be able to account for all of the evidence you've presented, and a good Essay 3 will likely evolve the thesis about 3 or 4 times before it's over. This is a lot to keep track of, and it's why making an outline for Essay 3 is crucial. It's the skeleton of your rough draft, and will let you keep better track of your many pieces of evidence and the complications and evolutions of the thesis they may lead to. Remember to look back at writing analytically to see these ideas explained more fully, and to see some short example essays tackling many of the issues you may encounter. Don't be afraid to ask your instructor for clarification or aid, and good luck in your research.